Howdy, I'm Grey Pilgrim. Well, as many of you know, I live in Oregon on the left coast. I specifically live in the mountain canyons facing west in the Cascades. Now, there's a reason for that. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, well, late 80s, I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Had a good job, had a wife. We just had a little baby boy, and I was looking forward to a good life there, but the news was really full of awful stuff. This thing called the Berlin Wall came down, and then country after country over there collapsed. And finally there was a coup that kicked out Gorbachev, and basically the USSR collapsed. Well, I was worried. I don't know if you know Albuquerque. It sits in the middle of the desert. It's the only city really in New Mexico. It sits where I-25 coming north-south meets I-40 going east-west. X marks the spot. There's a federal laboratory there called Sandia Labs. There's the Air Force Weapons Lab. There's near there is Monsanto Base where they store all the nukes. I mean, it's a place where things are targets right and left. And if you don't mind my French, it's pretty high up on what we used to call the shit list, which is the targeting list of the USSR in the event of a war. Well, I didn't know what was going to happen because, I mean, the Central Powers in Moscow had collapsed. There were rogue generals all over the place, many of whom had their fingers on nuclear triggers. And I thought at any moment we could be blasted back to the Stone Age. And I looked around and saw this baby boy I just sired. And I thought, enough of this shit. We're going to get out of here. Well, I had read, there's a guy named Bruce Clayton who wrote a book called Life After Doomsday. And in that book, he was looking at what they were calling a spasm war. Spasm war means that the Russians shoot everything they've got and we shoot everything we've got and blast both of us back to the beginning of time. And in that event, the two things to worry about is if you're in ground zero, you're dead. But if you're not, what are the prevailing wind patterns in terms of fallout? Well, there are only two places in North America that are relatively free from fallout. One of them are certain mountain valleys in the Ozarks in Arkansas, and the other is the Willamette River Valley on the western side of Oregon. Well, I don't know anybody in the Ozarks, but I got kin all over Oregon. So I packed up the U-Haul with a wife, baby, a cat, a rabbit, and everything else in the back, and we headed to Oregon. I thought I had a job. I had called in and I had been in contact with a company out here. Well, while we were traveling there, that company went Chapter 11. So I didn't even have a job. So I cashed in my retirement, and that's what we lived on for 6 months. We got down to the end of my retirement, and the credit card completely tapped out. And then I got a job, and things looked up from there. Well, that was many, many years ago. That was 1991. And I started over. Basically, I started all over again in 91. Well, thing is that from my preparations back then, when I lived in Albuquerque and later, I learned a lot. You know, for instance, in the event of nuclear war, the one thing you got to really worry about is radiation. Well, one place that you really have to worry about radiation is, I think it's iodine-131, which will affect your thyroid gland. You know, the goiters is from not enough iodine, and that's why they put iodine in salt to try and get us to have plenty of it. But it's not enough in the event of free-floating iodine-131 in the environment. So what do you need? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can take supplemental iodine tablets. Not recommended because iodine is basically toxic. But you know, I don't know if you knew it from later, but from the 50s and 60s, if a kid had an owie, mom would go into the medicine cabinet and pull out a little bottle like this with a swabbing unit that was on the end of a little dabbing thing that went down into it, and just put it on a little bit on the thing. What if that was a tincture of iodine that was used just as an antiseptic against whatever the owie was. That stuff, grab it and put a line about that long on your skin. Osmosis will carry it into the bloodstream, and it'll saturate your thyroid gland, and you don't have to worry about iodine-131. Now you got to worry about strontium-90, which looks a lot like calcium and gets absorbed by cow milk. So I guess best practices is after a nuclear war, don't drink milk. Going to be kind of a bear for kids, though, because mom is going to produce stuff that may or may not have strontium-90 in it. But I'm not going to worry about human milk, but I'll worry about cow milk. There's other things to learn. But one thing, I prepared by getting medical gear and radiation stuff and things like that. One thing I picked up surplus back then was a couple of these. What are these? Gas masks. This is a FEMA, well, not FEMA, this is an ERDA rated gas mask. ERDA is the great-grandfather of the Department of Energy. When the Atomic Energy Commission became later the ERDA, Energy Resources and Development Administration, which then later became the Department of Energy, this was their issue gas mask thing for, well, as it says on the label, storage and shelf, no, not that one, this one. Military canister, warfare gas, vapors and smokes. Federal Laboratories Incorporated, Acme Protection Equipment Corp. Canisters should be stored in a clean, dry place. Replace, well, it says the list used before January 1971. Oh well. Thing about these, so they use activated charcoal. You got to rip this thing off to open up the bottom of it. I know of a case of a woman in Israel during a supposed gas attack from, I forget who, but back in the 70s, put on a gas mask and died of asphyxiation because she hadn't taken this off. I got two of these, one for my ex and one for me. That wife is now my ex. Well, at least she gave me a good son. Well, anyway, these are kind of cool, kind of hard to come by these days, but especially one that's from Wile E. Coyote's favorite company, Acme. Isn't that cool? It says Acme on it. Oh well. Anyway, such concerns are concerns again because the world is going to hell in a handbasket right now. Iran has been shooting missiles off at Israel, and we've got troops over there. Ukraine is going crazy. We've been just about annihilated by hurricanes. Things are really bad right now. Time to start stocking up on stuff, guys. You know, if nothing else, stock up on food. I learned one thing very importantly. Get out of the cities. The country boy can't survive, you know, as the song says. Learn how to survive. Learn skills. If you can't afford supplies, at least gain skills. They'll stand you in good stead later in life. And it beats the heck out of not knowing how when you need somebody to know how. Heck, these days, guys don't even know how to work on their cars. You know, in my day, you had to know all of that stuff. All of it. Well, anyway, this is just my anti-radiation rant of the day. Happy trails.